Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Frumgen. You know, as a comic book fan, nothing ruffles my feathers more than hearing people gloss over the impact of comic books, or just plain ignorance of comic books. Now, this is not to say that I hate you if you've never read a Superman comic, but I'd be a little more than ticked off if you claim to know something about Superman with never reading one of his comics. Why? Because it all comes from comics. Yes, there are exceptions like Kryptonite and Livewire, but still, it all comes from the comic books, just like other movies or TV shows are based on books. With that in mind, I often hear pop culture pundits say that Batman Mask of the Phantasm is the greatest Batman movie ever. They of course will give you their reasons why, but almost none of them will mention the comic book Mask of the Phantasm is based on. I assume this is because they're just unaware of the comic book, and it always drives me nuts. This is like talking about how great the Lord of the Rings movies are and never mentioning the books. Philistines. So it's high time we give some love and recognition to the comic book behind Mask of the Phantasm. Mike Barr's Batman Year 2. Now to step backwards a bit, everybody knows Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli's Batman Year 1. Thanks to DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, DC's history had and was changing, and every character's history was up in the air. That, plus Miller's groundbreaking Batman the Dark Knight, put DC in the mood to modernizing Batman's history. Then, after the success of Year 1, DC was looking for a sequel. So, current Detective Comics writer Mike Barr stepped up to the plate, using a failed pitch of his before DC was interested in reworking Batman's history. Now, while Miller seemed to focus more on Gotham City and Commissioner Gordon, Barr focused more on Bruce Wayne himself. This is important because nearly everyone says the best part of Mask of the Phantasm is its focus on Bruce Wayne, opposed to all the other Batman movies. And that focus comes from Batman Year 2. Quick side note, Marv Wolfman would later do Batman Year 3, which would focus on Robin. Now let's talk about Mike Barr. I find he's one of the best and overlooked Batman writers, mainly because his work on Batman wasn't that long, though people tend to forget he wrote Batman and the Outsiders for years. For the most part, his Batman tales were typical Caped Crusader adventures, but then they also dug deep into the personal and emotional impact those adventures had on Bruce Wayne himself. Two of his best Batman tales involve Ra's al Ghul, and I'd argue that he was one of the best Ra's al Ghul writers next to Denny O'Neil himself, Ra's creator. In both stories, Batman suffers a personal loss. In Batman Annual Number 8 from 1982, with awesome art by Trevor Von Eeden, Batman teams up with Talia to take down her father, and in the end, Batman decides to kill Ra's, arguing that Ra's has cheated death so many times with the Lazarus Pit, could he ever really be killed? Talia, of course, is taken aback by this and basically breaks up with Batman. As the story ends, Robin reminds a forlorn Batman that he may have lost the girl, but he saved Gotham, and that's something. To which Batman simply presses ahead and says, no, that's everything. How perfect was that? I should note Barr reuses this in Detective Comics number 570 from 1987. When Joker turns Catwoman, who had been a Batman ally for the past few years, back into a full villain. Then Jason Todd Robin states that saving the day is still something too. And again Batman replies, no, it's everything. The next great race story by Mike Barr is Son of the Demon, also from 1987, with awesome artwork by Jerry Bingham. A must-read for any Batman fan. In it, Ra's and Batman team up to take down the terrorists who killed Talia's mother. All right, here come the spoilers. I mean it. Here come the spoilers. In the story, Batman and Talia spend the night together, and she becomes pregnant. Upon learning this, Bruce gives up being Batman. Talia fears the world still needs Batman and pretends to have a miscarriage, breaking Batman's heart. How the they've never made a movie of this story is beyond me. And then DC let Grant Morrison, who I usually love, just take a huge all over this story by saying Talia raped Bruce to have Damien. Just unforgivable in my opinion. Getting back to the topic at hand, the next big story for Mike Barr was Batman Year 2, again from 1987, in Detective Comics issues number 575 to 578. This story was obviously about Bruce Wayne's second year as Batman, when things were going fairly well for Batman and Bruce Wayne. Batman was making an impact, and the hollow shell of Bruce Wayne was in place as an effective cover for Batman. Then two people enter his life. One, the Reaper, a giant side-armed former Gotham vigilante who killed any and all in his path. The Reaper returns feeling that Batman is not doing a good enough job protecting Gotham City and nearly kills him in the first issue. The second person to enter Bruce's life is Rachel Caspian, a woman he falls so deeply in love with he plans to give up being Batman for. Sound familiar? At the end, with the Reaper defeated, so is any chance for Bruce to have a life with Rachel. Now, it doesn't play out the same way it does in Mask of the Phantasm from 1993, but you can see how heavily it borrows from Batman Year 2. Oddly enough, the most memorable part of Batman Year 2 wasn't even the hook of the story. Mike Barr pitched the story to DC as a team-up between Batman and Joe Chill, the guy who killed his parents. You see, the Reaper was just too big of a threat for Batman alone, and the bulk of the story is about Batman discovering how far he is willing to go on his war on crime, even to the point of getting a gun to defend himself against the Reaper, and planning to kill the veteran hitman Joe Chill, who he instantly recognizes as the man who killed his parents. Now, I won't spoil the story, because if you haven't read it, you darn well should. But it is odd that the real gem of the story is Rachel Caspian, the woman who almost saved Bruce Wayne. Knowing a great story angle when he sees it, the brilliant Alan Burnett, the writer of Mask of the Phantasm, used it to create Mask of the Phantasm. The Reaper became the Phantasm, and Rachel Caspian became Andrea Beaumont. And in not a direct parallel, Joe Chill was replaced by the Joker, as Alan was obviously more interested in creating an origin tale for Batman the Animated Series than merely adapting Year 2. I'd also like to point out that Rachel Dawes from Christopher Nolan's Batman movies was based on Rachel Caspian as well. One of the reasons I feel Batman Year 2 isn't as well remembered or celebrated as Batman Year 1 is because of the art. Not that it's bad, just that it features two great artists. Alan Davis drew the first issue, and Todd McFarlane drew the next three, inking the final issue himself. Issues 2 and 3 were inked by the very heavy-handed Alfredo Alcala. So while the issues look great by themselves, altogether they look like some sort of crazy quilt. Barr would bring Rachel and the Reaper back two more times. Once with Alan Davis in Batman Full Circle in 1991, and then again with Jerry Bingham in 2011 with DC Retroactive Batman the 1980s. So now, the next time you hear someone talk about Mask of the Phantasm and they don't mention Batman Year 2, you punch them right in the mouth for me. Or maybe not. Just tell them everything I told you. That'll do. Or you can share this video and subscribe. That would make everyone happy. So just forget the whole punching thing, okay? Oh, and thanks for watching.